When Trump tries to dismiss the accusations with fake proof, Barack Obama's calm response takes center stage. Obama doesn't just counter his claims, he hits Trump with a question that changes everything. If you're so honest, why don't you show the DNA test results? The press conference was humming along as usual. The bright lights from the camera flashes illuminated the faces of reporters, and the rhythmic tapping of keyboards filled the air as journalists jotted down notes. President Donald Trump, standing confidently at the podium, had just finished addressing a question about his administration's stance on international trade. The usual bravado was on full display as he praised his own policies, speaking about job growth and a booming economy. There were moments of sharp rhetoric, moments of humor, but nothing out of the ordinary for a man who thrived in the spotlight. The room was buzzing with questions, the same ones they always asked. Mr. President, what's your strategy for the upcoming election? How do you plan to handle the rising tensions with China? It was predictable, routine, until it wasn't. The atmosphere in the room shifted as an unexpected figure entered, causing a ripple of surprise. Barack Obama, former President of the United States, had just walked into the press briefing room. The chatter that had once filled the space dropped to a stunned silence. Obama had been out of the political spotlight for years, but no one ever truly forgot him. His presence commanded attention. He was cool, collected, and as poised as ever. He wasn't supposed to be there, at least not today. The reporters turned their heads, unsure of what to make of this sudden appearance. What was he doing here? What was going on? Obama, dressed in his usual sharp suit, walked up to the front of the room and positioned himself just a few feet from where Trump stood, his eyes briefly meeting those of the current president. The tension was palpable. Trump glanced at him, but didn't say anything at first. It was almost as if the room didn't know how to process what was happening. Obama wasn't a guest. He wasn't a special advisor. He was here standing in the lion's den. Then, without any preamble, a reporter turned toward Obama and asked the question that would change everything. Mr. Obama, can you show proof of the accusations you and Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett have made about President Trump and his family? Specifically, the accusations involving the DNA tests, Barron Trump, and your claims of irregularities. The question landed with a heavy thud, breaking the stillness in the room. It wasn't a question that could be easily dodged, and certainly not one that anyone had expected. The press had been trying to dig into the allegations for some time, but now it was on the table, raw, unfiltered, and aimed directly at Trump. For a split second, the room was in complete silence. Every eye locked on Obama. He stood there calmly, his expression unreadable. But the moment didn't last long. Trump, quick to seize the opportunity to shift the conversation in his favor, stepped forward. "Look, this is exactly what's wrong with the media today," he said, his voice booming across the room. "This is just a stunt. This whole thing, all these accusations, it's just a way to stay in the news. They've got nothing, folks. Absolutely nothing." He was pointing at Obama and Crockett, now trying to push the narrative that this was all some kind of political theater. They don't have proof. They just want to keep themselves relevant. It's all fake. Trump's words were sharp, dismissive, and meant to close the conversation before it could even begin. The room shifted again as reporters watched the two men, both powerful in their own right, poised for what was sure to be a verbal sparring match. The president was playing to his base as usual, casting doubt on anything that might challenge his authority. The press conference was suddenly more than just about policy. It was personal. Obama, however, was unshaken. He didn't flinch. He stood tall, his hands clasped in front of him. He waited for the noise to settle before speaking in a calm, steady voice that carried across the room. "Donald," Obama began, his tone cool but firm, "we've shown the proof repeatedly. We've provided the evidence in full. But you know what? Even if you don't want to accept it, the facts speak for themselves. It's not about staying in the headlines. It's about doing the right thing for this country." He paused, letting his words sink in. The contrast was stark. Trump's frantic, all-consuming energy stood in direct opposition to Obama's measured and steady approach. The reporters in the room shifted, sensing the tension. Obama wasn't rattled. He wasn't playing into Trump's game. He was offering something far more powerful: credibility and truth. And as he spoke, it became increasingly clear that he wasn't there to fight for attention or power. He was there to make a point, and he was going to do it calmly but decisively. Trump tried to regain control of the situation. "I've said it before, Obama, this whole thing is a farce. You're trying to create problems where there aren't any. No one's buying it anymore." But Obama didn't back down. In fact, he seemed to become even more determined. His calm demeanor now had an almost magnetic quality. It was as if he knew exactly what he was doing, knew the questions the press would ask, and knew exactly how to answer them. The moment had shifted. It wasn't just a routine press conference anymore. It was a political showdown, one that had quickly become something far more tense and personal. Trump, the man who had spent years dominating the conversation, suddenly found himself on the defensive. Obama wasn't here to play the political game. He was here to lay out the truth and to make sure everyone knew that the accusations now weren't just about Trump. They were about the very fabric of trust and transparency that the American public deserved. The reporters caught in the crossfire looked on, knowing that whatever came next would be a turning point in this intense exchange. The press conference had taken an unexpected turn, and no one knew exactly where it would go from here. But one thing was certain: Obama had everyone's attention. And this was just the beginning. Trump's attempt to control the narrative had hit a snag, and it was only just beginning. As the room held its breath, Obama's calm response hung in the air. The reporters were watching closely, sensing a shift in the mood. Trump, usually the loudest voice in the room, had been challenged, not with shouting or insults, but with something far more potent: quiet confidence. Obama was and in that moment, it became clear that he wasn't going to let Trump get away with deflecting the serious questions. The tension thickened, and Trump was the first to break the silence. He didn't like being questioned in such a direct way, especially not when the issue at hand was something so personal, so tied to his family. He leaned in, his voice rising once again, trying to reassert control over the room. "Let me make something perfectly clear," he said, pointing a finger toward Obama. "This whole thing, it's a fake story. They're just trying to make a spectacle out of nothing. They've got no proof, none, and they know it." Trump's tone was louder now, sharp with frustration, but Obama remained the picture of composure. Trump continued, clearly wanting to paint Obama and Jasmine Crockett as nothing more than political opportunists. "This is all just an attempt to stay relevant, to grab headlines. That's all this is. They know they can't win on the issues, so they're pulling this stunt." Trump's voice had that familiar brashness to it, as if his words could bulldoze anything in their path. But Obama didn't flinch. He was not about to get dragged into a shouting match. Instead, he stood his ground, his voice still measured, but unwavering. "You keep saying there's no proof, Donald." Obama began calmly, looking at the room, his words aimed directly at Trump. "But the truth is, we've already shown it. We've shown it many times. It's in the public record. It's there for anyone who wants to see it." There was no shouting, no finger-pointing, just facts. Obama wasn't arguing for the sake of arguing. He was presenting what he knew to be the truth. His calmness contrasted sharply with Trump's increasing agitation. The reporters, sensing the shift, leaned forward, the weight of the moment settling over the room. Obama wasn't interested in playing Trump's game. He was here to show the strength of his position and to force the president into a corner. Trump, growing more agitated by the second, tried again to deflect. "You're all buying into their lies, just like the rest of the media. It's all a distraction. They've got nothing. They've always got nothing." Trump's words came faster now, his face wringing as he spoke. "You guys just want to keep the drama going, stir up trouble. It's all about staying on TV, staying in the headlines. That's it." Obama took a deep breath. He wasn't going to let Trump's chaos steer the conversation. Instead, he stayed steady, his tone calm but authoritative. "The problem with your argument, Donald," Obama said, glancing briefly at the reporters before meeting Trump's gaze, "is that it's not based on the facts. We've already shown the facts. We've already provided the evidence, not just once, but multiple times. You know it, and everyone here knows it." The words landed with quiet force. There was no denying the weight of what Obama was saying. He wasn't throwing accusations around, he was simply stating the reality that Trump had tried so hard to ignore. Trump, however, wasn't going to let the moment go. "It's all lies, fake news, a bunch of people trying to ruin my reputation," he shot back, his voice now tinged with desperation. Obama, without missing a beat, responded, "And yet, Donald, you still haven't addressed the facts." He wasn't raising his voice, but there was a quiet authority in his words. "You can keep calling it fake, but the truth is, the public deserves to know what's going on. They deserve the facts, not the distractions. We've given them the facts. What have you given them?" Obama's gaze was steady, his words cutting through the noise. Trump, struggling to regain control, looked around the room, his eyes darting. His frustration was growing, and he had no clear way to counter Obama's calm, deliberate responses. "I've done more for this country than any president in history," Trump spat, trying to shift the narrative once more. "I've created jobs, made America stronger. You can't take that away." Obama, still calm, leaned forward slightly. "It's not about who's done the most, Donald. It's about doing the right thing. It's about transparency. It's about the people you claim to represent." The words hung in the air. It was a subtle jab, but a pointed one aimed right at Trump's leadership style. Obama wasn't concerned with outshining Trump in the spotlight. He was concerned with the integrity of the process. And in this moment, he was showing Trump that integrity couldn't be ignored, no matter how loud or forceful one's argument might be. The room was silent for a beat, the tension almost unbearable. Trump, the man who had built his career on dominating debates, now found himself locked in a verbal duel with Obama, who had a gift for cutting through the noise with the precision of a surgeon. The crowd could feel the shift. The confidence and poise of Obama was slowly unraveling Trump's attempt to spin the situation in his favor. The more Trump tried to attack, the more Obama's credibility and calmness pushed back against it. Obama's message was clear. It wasn't about the drama. It wasn't about winning a rhetorical battle. It was about truth, transparency, and the responsibility that came with leadership. And no amount of deflection from Trump could change that. Trump, now visibly frustrated, tried once more to dominate the conversation, but Obama wasn't backing down. The facts are there, Donald Obama said one last time, his voice unwavering. You can try to avoid them, but the truth won't go away, and no amount of noise will change that. In that moment, Obama's steady resolve stood in stark contrast to Trump's mounting frustration. The battle for control of the narrative had shifted, and it was clear that Obama, despite his quiet demeanor, was winning. The exchange had taken a turn, and the room was charged with anticipation. Every reporter's eyes were fixed on Obama, who had managed to sidestep Trump's bluster and keep the conversation focused on the facts. But now Obama was about to raise the stakes even higher. The question he had been waiting for, the question that could change everything, was on the tip of his tongue. He had spent his political career crafting the art of the subtle, cutting remark, and now it was Trump's turn to feel its sting. With a shift in his posture, Obama locked eyes with Trump. For a brief moment, the room felt as if it had stopped breathing. Obama's voice, though calm, carried with it the weight of 1,000 past moments of political experience. It was clear he was about to make a move that would put Trump on the defensive once again. If you're so certain of your truth, Donald, Obama began, the words flowing effortlessly, why don't you just show the world the DNA test results for Barron? The question struck with the precision of a blade. It wasn't just a challenge. It was an open invitation to Trump to clear up one of the most controversial and mysterious aspects of his family's life. Barron Trump, his youngest son, had been at the center of whispers and rumors ever since he had appeared on the political stage as a young child. Questions about his parentage, his biological mother, and his connection to Trump's former wife had swirled around the tabloids and political circles. But through it all, Trump had refused to release any concrete proof, opting instead for vague comments that did nothing to quell the speculation. For a moment, there was complete silence in the room. The air seemed to grow thick, as if everyone present understood that the question Obama had just asked was the one everyone had been waiting for, the one that could expose the cracks in Trump's carefully constructed armor. Trump, taken aback by the directness of Obama's question, hesitated. His face momentarily betrayed a flicker of uncertainty before quickly shifting back into his usual confident, defiant expression. He was known for his ability to turn any question into an attack. But this time, the question had hit too close to home. I know the truth, Trump said, his voice laced with impatience. His response was swift, a classic Trump deflection. I don't need to prove anything to anyone. Barron knows the truth, and that's all that matters. The words came out quickly, but Obama wasn't done. He wasn't going to let Trump squirm out of this one, so Obama's gaze remained fixed on him, unblinking, his words cutting through the tension with surgical precision. The truth, Donald, isn't just for you and Barron, Obama replied, his tone still steady, but now more pointed. The truth is something the public deserves to see. You've had no problem parading your family in front of the cameras when it suits you. Why hide now? Why not let the American people see the evidence? The room was absolutely still, the weight of Obama's words hanging heavy in the air. Trump, now visibly flustered, tried to regain his composure, but the damage had been done. Obama's challenge wasn't just about the DNA test anymore. It was about something much larger. It was about trust, transparency, and the idea that the public deserved to know the truth, not just from their elected leaders, but from the first family itself. Trump, struggling to come up with a suitable rebuttal, shifted his stance. Look, this is all nonsense, he muttered, though the frustration in his voice was evident. Everyone's obsessed with my family. You think I should just hand out DNA tests like it's some kind of game? I'm not playing your little game, Obama. But Obama wasn't backing down. He wasn't interested in playing Trump's game of deflection and distraction. Instead, he pressed on, his voice calm but carrying a sharp edge that cut through the tension in the room. You're right, Donald. This isn't about a game, Obama said, his words deliberate. But it's about accountability. If you're willing to put yourself out there as the leader of this country to claim you're doing what's best for the American people, then you owe it to them to be transparent. They deserve the truth, not just from you, but from your family. If you're so confident in your version of events, then show the world the truth. Let Barron know that he doesn't need to hide behind questions. Let the world see that there's nothing to hide. The weight of the moment was undeniable. Trump, who had spent his entire political career dodging questions and challenging anyone who dared to question his authority, was now caught in a corner. Obama's words had planted a seed of doubt in the minds of the reporters in the room, and in the minds of the American public who were watching from home. Why wasn't Trump willing to release the test? What did he have to hide? For a moment, Trump stood there, his mouth slightly open, struggling to find the words to push back against Obama's point. The truth was, there was no easy way to answer this. No matter how much Trump deflected, no matter how many times he called it a hoax or fake news, the fact remained, he had never been willing to provide the proof that Obama had so calmly requested. And that more than anything was what left the room hanging in uncertainty. You're accusing me of hiding something, Trump finally spat, his voice rising again. But you're the one who's making this all about me. This is just another distraction. Obama didn't flinch. The distraction, Donald, is that you're the one avoiding the truth. The truth that the American people deserve to know. The truth that your own son deserves to know. The silence that followed was deafening. Trump, caught in the crosshairs of a question he couldn't sidestep, tried to regain his footing, but Obama's words had done their damage. In that moment, Obama wasn't just questioning Trump's refusal to release the DNA test. He was questioning his entire approach to leadership. His transparency, or lack thereof, was now the central issue. The room knew it, the viewers knew it, and Trump, no matter how hard he tried to deflect, couldn't change the fact that Obama had successfully forced him into a corner. And so the game had changed. Obama had raised a question that would echo long after the press conference ended. It wasn't just about Barron's DNA test anymore. It was about the trust between a president and the people. And Trump's inability to answer the question left the room wondering just how far he would go to keep his secrets hidden. As the press conference dragged on, it became clear that something deeper was unfolding. The tension in the room was no longer just about politics or policy. It was about family truth and the unsettling idea that the man who held the highest office in the land was not willing to be open with the very people he was supposed to serve. Obama, having asked his pointed question about the DNA test, now turned the conversation towards something more emotional and far more personal. Trump's face, which had once been filled with a confident smirk, began to tighten. He could feel the pressure mounting, and the fact that Obama wasn't backing down only seemed to intensify the weight of the moment. Obama wasn't just calling out his refusal to show the test results. He was making it about Barron, Trump's son, his youngest child, a boy who had grown up in the shadow of his father's public life, his every move scrutinized by the media. Obama, with his unflinching calm, had just shifted the stakes. Now, it wasn't about the political games or the accusations. It was about Barron's future and the emotional toll that living in such an uncertain world would take on him. Barron deserves to know the truth. Donald, Obama said, his voice softening just a touch, but still firm. He's a young boy growing up in a world where everything he does is under a microscope. Don't you think it's time he knows the truth about who his real mother is? The question landed with a quiet intensity, and for a moment, the room held its breath. Trump's eyes flashed with anger as Obama spoke, but the sting of the question was undeniable. It wasn't just about Barron's parentage. It was about the larger issue of truth. The very thing Obama had been driving at all along. Transparency. Obama wasn't calling Trump a liar. He wasn't even accusing him of hiding something sinister. He was simply stating a fact. Barron, like every child, deserved the clarity that comes with the truth. The room was silent. The weight of Obama's words hung heavy in the air, and even the reporters, who had been so eager to ask their next questions, seemed to pause, as if taking in the emotional turn the conversation had just taken. Trump's response was immediate, but it wasn't the defiance that had characterized his earlier remarks. Now, his voice was edged with frustration, the cracks in his composure showing. Why is this so important to you, Obama? Trump shot back, his eyes narrowing. Why do you care so much about my family? Why are you digging into something that doesn't concern you? Obama's calm didn't waver. Because it does concern me, Donald, he said. It concerns all of us. Barron is an American citizen, and he deserves to know the truth. He's growing up in a country where transparency and honesty are supposed to be the foundation of our government. And right now, your refusal to show that test is sending the wrong message. It's telling him that the truth isn't important. That it's okay to keep secrets, even when those secrets affect people's lives. Trump's face rained, and he looked as though he might snap back with another deflecting comment. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the quiet certainty in Obama's voice. Maybe it was the way the room had become more somber, as if everyone was quietly waiting for Trump to answer. Not as the president, but as a father. But Trump didn't answer right away. He shifted uncomfortably, like someone who had just been asked a question they didn't know how to respond to. Obama, sensing the shift, pressed on. You're not just a public figure, Donald, he continued, his voice now carrying a bit of emotion that had been absent before. You're a father, and Barron is your son. He's not some political pawn. He's not just part of your image. He's a real person who will grow up and have to make sense of the world around him. Don't you think he deserves the truth? Trump's expression hardened. You don't know anything about my family. Obama, you don't know what it's like to have the entire world watching your every move. Barron doesn't need you or anyone else telling him what to believe. His voice was sharp, defensive, but there was an edge of vulnerability hidden beneath the anger. The truth was, Trump had always kept his family's life close to the vest. The media, with its endless questions about Barron, had always been a thorn in his side. Now, facing Obama's directness, that thorn was starting to feel more like a dagger. But Obama wasn't letting up. You're right, Donald, he said. I don't know what it's like to be in your shoes, but I do know this. If Barron is to grow up in this world, he's going to have to face the truth. And if you love him, you'll want to give him that clarity. Hiding behind your secrets, avoiding the truth, doesn't protect him. It only makes things harder for him down the line. Trump's jaw tightened, but Obama's words had hit their mark. Barron, for all his public life as the son of the president, was still a child, a young boy who, like any other, would one day look back at these moments and try to make sense of them. What would Barron think when he grew older and learned that his father had refused to show something as simple as a DNA test result? Would he feel betrayed by the secrecy? Would he feel like he had been kept in the dark for his entire life? Trump, now visibly uncomfortable, shifted the focus once more. But it was clear that Obama had forced him into a corner. "You don't understand, Obama. It's none of your business," Trump said, his words clipped. "People need to stop focusing on my family." But Obama wasn't finished. "It's not about your family, Donald," he said softly. "It's about setting the right example for Barron. It's about showing him that honesty, transparency, and integrity matter. That's what we owe him." The room fell quiet again, the weight of Obama's words sinking in. Trump had nothing more to say. He looked down, fidgeting with his notes, clearly rattled by the emotional turn the conversation had taken. The president, who had spent so much of his career deflecting, manipulating, and controlling the narrative, now found himself unable to respond to a question about his own son's future. Obama had done something that no one had expected. He had used Trump's own fatherhood against him, not as a weapon, but as a reminder of the larger responsibility that came with being in the public eye. In that moment, Obama's message was clear. The truth wasn't just for political gain, it was for Barron. It was for all the children growing up in a world that needed honesty and transparency. Trump, for the first time in a long while, had no easy way out. The emotional truth had finally become part of the conversation, and there was no turning back. The press conference had been a battlefield of words, each round taking its toll on Trump's composure. His usual bravado had been chipped away, layer by layer, as Obama's steady.com and sharp questions had exposed cracks in his defenses. Trump had tried to control the narrative, but Obama had relentlessly turned every attempt to deflect into an opportunity to press the truth. And now, in the final moments of this high-stakes exchange, Obama was about to deliver the blow that would echo far beyond the confines of this press room. Trump, ever the master of distractions, had resorted to his usual tactic of pushing the conversation away from the uncomfortable truths. He had used his family, his accomplishments, and his power to evade answering the hard questions. But Obama wasn't fooled, and he wasn't going to let the president slip away without addressing the core issue. The stakes had escalated far beyond political rivalry. It was now a matter of integrity, and Obama had made it clear that he wasn't going to let Trump hide from the truth any longer. "You're trying to avoid the DNA test, Donald, because you're guilty," Obama said, his voice as calm and deliberate as ever. But the words were sharp, cutting through the air like a scalpel. The room seemed to go still. It wasn't just the audacity of Obama's statement that took everyone by surprise, but the confidence with which he said it. He wasn't yelling or gesturing wildly. He wasn't playing to the crowd. He was simply stating what he believed to be the truth. And in that moment, the starkness of his words landed with incredible force. Trump froze. His mouth opened, then closed again, like a man who had been struck speechless. He wasn't used to being backed into a corner, not by anyone, let alone a former president who had already left office. He was accustomed to dominating debates with bravado, to controlling the narrative with bluster and deflection. But this time, Obama wasn't playing along. The tables had turned, and Trump now found himself on the defensive. His usual tactics ineffective against Obama's steady hand. "What do you mean guilty?" Trump finally spat, his face wringing as his frustration became palpable. He had been put on the back foot for so long that now all he could do was lash out. "This is ridiculous. You're just trying to stir up trouble." Obama's expression didn't change. He wasn't reacting to the heat of Trump's words. He was simply stating what was clear to him. "You're guilty of avoiding the truth, Donald," Obama said. "You're guilty of making excuses instead of showing the world what they have a right to see. Barron deserves to know who his real mother is. The American people deserve to know the truth." Each word Obama spoke seemed to sink deeper into the room, with the reporters watching closely, their pens hovering over their notepads, uncertain whether to take down what they had just heard or to wait for more. Obama wasn't accusing Trump of some grand conspiracy, but of something far simpler, far more damaging to Trump's credibility. He was accusing him of hiding the truth. Trump's eyes narrowed and he shook his head, trying to regain his footing. His usual tactics weren't working here. Obama wasn't playing his game. "This is all nonsense," Trump said, his voice cracking slightly as he struggled to push back. "You don't know what you're talking about. I don't need to prove anything to anyone." But Obama wasn't finished. He leaned in slightly, his voice still calm, but now carrying the kind of authority that only comes from someone who has nothing left to hide. "You've made this personal," Donald, Obama said. "You've tried to turn this into a political game, but this isn't about politics. It's about accountability. It's about responsibility. And the truth is, you're trying to avoid that responsibility. You're trying to avoid the truth because it would expose you for what you are. Someone who doesn't want to be held accountable." Trump, now visibly rattled, lashed out once more. "I've done more for this country than anyone else. I don't have to explain myself to anyone. I'm the president." His voice was rising again, the familiar tone of defiance creeping back in. But it wasn't as forceful this time. There was an edge to it, a hint of desperation that hadn't been there earlier in the debate. He had lost control, and everyone could see it. Obama's response was the calmest of them all. "You're the president, Donald," he said, his words measured. "But that doesn't mean you're above the truth. The truth isn't something you can avoid because it's inconvenient. The truth is something you have to face, especially when it involves your own family. Barron deserves to know who his real mother is, and so does the American public. You can't keep hiding behind your position of power." Obama's words hit like a hammer. They were not just about Barron or the DNA test anymore. They were about something much bigger. The very principles of leadership, honesty, and transparency. Trump's presidency had been built on a foundation of defiance, a refusal to be questioned, a refusal to be held accountable. But now, in front of the cameras and the world, Obama was showing the true cost of that defiance. The crowd could feel the shift. There was a palpable sense of something breaking. The tension that had been building throughout the conference finally reached its peak. Obama had done what no one had been able to do before. He had put Trump in a position where he could no longer control the conversation. He had exposed the cracks in the facade, and in doing so had changed the entire tone of the press conference. Trump stood there, his hands clenched, his mouth opening and closing as though he wanted to say something. Anything, to salvage the moment, but there was nothing left to say. Obama had delivered the final blow, and it was clear to everyone in the room that Trump had no way of answering it. As the press conference drew to a close, the atmosphere had changed. The usual chatter of reporters scrambling to ask their final questions was absent. Instead, there was an uneasy quiet as people slowly began to process what had just happened. Obama had taken down the mighty walls that Trump had built around himself, and in doing so had shifted the balance of power in the room. This wasn't just a clash of political ideologies. This was something more fundamental, a clash between the truth and the lies, between accountability and deflection. Obama's words had cut through the noise, and in that moment, it was clear the American people weren't just watching a debate. They were witnessing the unraveling of a narrative and the beginning of Trump's downfall. As Obama walked away from the podium, his final statement echoed in the room. "You're guilty of avoiding the truth, Donald, and the truth will catch up with you." The press conference ended, but the weight of that moment lingered in the air long after the cameras were turned off. The world would be talking about this one for a long time.